inner carcass.
Yes. Hi and welcome. We're going to wait a few seconds while our attendees fill into our Zoom webinar. Get comfortable. Oh, Kelly's got a guy walking around in the background. As I've learned as we prepared for this talk, there is nothing more dramatic and exciting than the insular world of condors. So I think we're in for a real treat today. Looks like we have a big crowd filling in, which is exciting to see. All right, so I'm going to get some bookkeeping out of the way as the rest of you fill in. Hi and welcome. Thank you for joining us at Alta Live. This is our digital event series for Alta Journal. We are a magazine focused on California and the West. My name is Beth, I'm Alta's digital editor. And today I am really excited to welcome Ventana Wildlife Society Executive Director, Kelly Sorenson, and Alta Journal contributor, Joy Lanzendorfer. Joy penned an article, Flight of the Condors, in the current issue of Alta. And we're going to be kind of discussing her exciting adventure in trying to spot a condor in the wild, as well as getting to know the history, the present, and the future of the California condor, of which Kelly is not only our expert, but I think the expert. I'm going to interview Kelly and Joy for about 25 minutes, and then we're going to get to your questions. So please do post them in the chat or by using the question feature down below. We've actually already gotten some in via email. I will try to get to as many of your questions as I can at the end of the discussion. If you miss anything, don't worry. This whole conversation will be posted at altaonline.com later this afternoon. And if you've registered for this, I've got your email, so I'm going to send you a bunch of links to the Condor Cam, the Ventana Wildlife Society, the article in Alta that Joy wrote about spotting the condors, and all about that. So please check your email later today. I'm going to fill it with condor goodness. Again, we are Alta Quarterly Magazine. We host events like this every Wednesday. We also have a California book club, a monthly California book club. We focus on books about California or by California authors. So please do check us out. And with that, let's get started. Let's talk condors. Joy, I'd like to start with you. We've worked together a lot on all sorts of things, namely kind of Jack London history. What landed you in Pinnacles Park trying to spot a condor in the wild? How did this story come to be in Alta?
Well, I don't know if other people do this. I'm sure they do. I sort of have a list in my head of animals that I want to see in the wild. I go to a lot of parks and I'm out in nature a lot. And it's not like a bucket list or anything. It's just, animals that would be cool to see. And they range from something I'm likely to see, like a monkey. At some point I'll probably see a monkey in the wild, to something that's really rare, like a narwhal. Like I'd love to see a narwhal, but it's realistically not likely to happen. And so the California condor has always been on this list. The funny thing is, up until recently, I would have assumed it would be more like the narwhal, where it's a critically endangered animal, and it didn't seem like I might be able to see one. When I was a kid, there was only 9 condors left alive in the wild at one point, and they took them into captivity at that point. And so that generally is a bad sign. But condors have responded really well to conservation efforts, and now there's something like 300 condors in the wild. And their range has expanded from, Southern and Central California and in the Southwest. And they're talking about putting them in Northern California. So it started to look like I could see one of these animals or these birds. And, they, aside from the fact that they are just an amazing bird, the largest flying bird in North America, they have a wingspan of 10 feet. And they're just sort of iconic California birds, and something I've always wanted to see. We're also in this period of climate change. And last year when I was working on this article, it was just bad news after bad news. I mean, it still is, but, and I was really interested in how the California condor sort of fit in as a symbol of healing the damage that we do to nature. And I I couldn't decide if it was, you know, how exactly to look at it. Was it sort of an optimistic sign because we have helped them so much and they are better, or is it, also just, there's a pessimistic side of it, which is they are still endangered. Lead poisoning is still an issue, so I really wanted to go and try to see one in the wild and learn more about them and just sort of try to answer some of my questions about them. So that was the idea. Yeah.
Um, Kelly, can you, for those of us who are not as familiar with the California condor, give us, it seems like it's been a really dramatic, sad, exciting trajectory for the California condor. Can you give us a recap of a quick recap of the condor's history?
Yeah, back in the 1980s, the population got to an all-time low of just 22 individuals. And at the time, there was a last-ditch effort to preserve the gene pool and capture the remaining birds in the wild and bring them into captivity. And at the time, that was a pretty significant event. At the time that made the species extinct in the wild, essentially. And no one knew if the captive breeding program would work, let alone be able to release them successfully to the wild. But we fast forward several decades later, and we found that we are on the right track. We've discovered the number one threat, which you've already mentioned, is lead poisoning, which is an ingestion issue. We've worked with the zoos and have been producing captive bred condors for the wild, and we're on the right track. We're going in the right direction. But you're right, the species is still critically endangered.
And we've gone from single digits or 22, I guess you mentioned at the to how many condors are currently in the wild?
It's over 300. At the end of 2020, it was 329 individuals, 504 living entirely. So that includes the zoos. So that's still a very low number. 300 of any species is still very, very low. So we still have a long way to go.
What is your, Kelly, connection to the condor? This is what you do. You work to preserve this species and help it grow. What is so special about them for you?
Well, Joy hinted at it. When I grew up, and this sort of dates me, I learned about animals in books and zoos, not the internet. But I was sort of disappointed at the time that some animals could only be seen in books and zoos. And I wanted to see animals in the wild. And I even, one time I drove 14 hours in a day just so I could get to a location where I might be able to see a golden eagle. This was on the East Coast where I grew up. So I was very deeply moved by the fact that we had a lot of animals that were supposed to be here and they just weren't. So that's been a big motivating factor for me. Not only am I completely in love with the condor, and before that, I worked very closely with the bald eagle. But I think more than that, it's this idea that it can work if we all put our minds to it, that it can be a model of success for others to follow around the world.
We actually got a question about that, and it seems like a great time to dive in and ask it, if that's okay. Is there, what can be learned by what you've done in kind of restoring and helping to restore the condor population? What lessons from the work to save the condor might be applied to current and future efforts to preserve the myriad, sadly, of other species facing extinction due to climate change?
Well, I can answer that, even broader, not just limiting it to climate change. But, unfortunately, wildlife have a whole host or whole suite of limiting factors out there or threats that they have to deal with. And I think what we've learned in this condor recovery program is that lead poisoning from spent ammunition is a much bigger problem than any of us ever really thought. And, you know, it first takes understanding the problem before you can solve it. And so not only have we helped greatly in identifying this underlying threat that affects a lot of different wildlife, not just condors, but we've also been putting in place practical solutions on solving those problems, such as providing free copper ammunition to hunters and ranchers. We really are fully behind the hunting and ranching community to make a switch. It's absolutely critical, and we want to work together with them to make that a reality.
It's kind of amazing that a wildlife conservation organization is passing out free bullets.
Yeah, well, when we first started doing that, the local newspaper wrote an article on us and said, most nonprofit or most wildlife conservation organizations hand out plushie toys, not Ventana Wildlife Society. And I love that. You know, we're addressing the issue at its root. You know, we're addressing the fundamental problem here. And that's what we need to do. Otherwise, we're just sort of spinning our wheels and not making any progress.
By way of kind of taking a moment and getting a scope of how big, and some would say beautiful, others would say, oh my God, what is that? Let's take a look, if we can, at some, I'm going to share my screen of some, hang tight. I'm going to start a slideshow. And let's take a look at some condors. Oh no, hold on, I've screwed this up while I figured this out. These photos, I think, were taken by a volunteer at the Ventana Wildlife Society. Is this working for everyone? Can we see?
I can see it.
The images? Great, sorry. All right, so Kelly, who are we looking at? What are we looking at?
Well, in particular, this is an adult condor. It's actually, the individual is 204. I know that by the number and the color tag. There's actually a tool online called Condor Spotter that was created by Tim Huntington, who's also the photographer of this photograph. Condor Spotter is a wonderful online tool to identify the bird that you see based on the tag. So this is 204. It's an adult. It's been around for a long time. Has a territory along, oh, what's a long time? Oh, yeah. I'd have to look up his bio on our website to give you an accurate number, but this 204 is at least 10 to 15 years of age. And our oldest condors are now in their 20s, actually. And another fun fact, condors can live over 50 years in the wild. They're extremely long-lived and very, very social, which is, I think, the reason why people fall in love with these birds. They might be more considered the beast than the beauty, but people fall in love with the beast too.
And is this, are we looking at a 10-foot wingspan here?
I think it's probably 9.5 to 10 feet. The 9.5 is about an average. So yeah, absolutely.
That is something. All right. All of these are tagged. Can you talk a little bit about the numbering system and these whatever's clipped to their wings here?
Yeah, the numbering system is a way to keep track of every living individual. So in the very beginning, when we first started, the very first condor was given the number 1, and that's actually Topa Topa, who's a 50-plus-year-old condor in captivity. Then we fast forward to present day. We're now in the thousands. The stub book numbers are up around 1,030 or something like that. And so when we identify a new individual, it gets the next number. And we place these wing tags on so that we can identify them in the field. And, important note about that is we really view these tags symbolically also. I mean, they're very important now because they help us manage the flock and keep track of them and so on. But symbolically, we don't want to see tags on these birds. And eventually, when they are self-sustaining and completely on their own again, they won't be flying around with those tags anymore. And it's really just a function of, the current work that's needed today. But again, our long-term vision is that they will not have those on anymore.
But in addition to the numbered tags that each one of these condors have, they also have names, like adorable and charming names.
The more we study these birds, the more we realize they have unique personalities. And we just thought it would be a fun way to connect people with these birds, much like our field biologists do. It's funny, I sometimes will hear the field team, they come back and they're talking about these birds and all the social drama and everything going on. And I'm thinking they're talking about their own personal lives. And here they are, they're talking about the birds. And so it gave us this idea that people would really like to connect with them on an individual level or more personal level. So we gave them names and bios, and all of that can be found online.
I mean, that would seem really fun. Who gets to choose the names?
The public, for the most part. Our field team has named the majority of the birds, and then we open it up to the public as well, so that we can give an opportunity for everyone. And for example, the chick that was on the streaming camera last year was named Aniko. We had something like 650 suggested names, but when the field team scanned through those list of names and saw Aniko, we realized that was the best one because it meant born in troubled times in Nigerian. And that just seemed like, apropos for this chick that went through so much last year with the Dolan fire and losing her father and so on and so forth.
Yeah, Joy, you wrote about Aniko in your article. What about that story? Well, I know word count is tight. So how did you worked Aniko in there?
Yeah.
What was important about that story?
Well, I mean, I was talking about the positive and the positive way of viewing this and the negative way and the optimism and pessimism. And as I was starting out the story, there was a very sad thing that happened, which was that the Dolan fire burned through the Condor sanctuary and killed how many birds was it, Kelly? 11 birds, is it?
It killed 9 free-flying condors initially. A 10th bird later died from burn wounds, and then 2 chicks also died in nests.
Yeah. So Aniko was in its nest. And they have a nest cam. So there's some very dramatic, if you want to go on the YouTube channel for Ventana, you can see this dramatic night of the fire where the bird is in this tree. And I think the tree was actually on fire, right? And so the next morning, or whenever the fire was over, both of Aniko's parents had disappeared. But then the mother, was it Redwood Queen? She came back.
Yes.
So, but they think the one of the 11 birds was Aniko's father. So here's this little chick in this burned out nest way up in a redwood tree. And then, I guess condors are territorial. So since the male was gone, another male came and tried to take over the nest. And so there's another dramatic video where he comes in and tussles with the bird and they all fall out. You probably could tell the story better than I can, but it was very dramatic. Do you want to say what happened? What ended up happening?
Where's Aniko now?
Well, by the way, Joy, you're doing great. But to finish the story, what happened was Aniko, when flushed out of her nest, our field team noticed a kind of a minor limp, and we didn't know how serious that injury was, and we just didn't want to take the chance. This chick was on the ground, only had the one parent, so we decided to rescue Aniko, and we were successful at doing that, and that bird is now at the Los Angeles Zoo, and we plan to bring the chick back for release this year.
What do you need what are the kind of qualifications or benchmarks that a bird like Aniko would need to achieve before you decide to release?
Great question. Because these are very long-lived birds, they really don't even typically gain independence from their parents naturally in the wild until about 1.5 years. So there's a lot of upbringing, a lot of rearing that needs to take place to make these birds more successful. When we first got started a little over 20 years ago, we were releasing 6-month-old condors, and it was really difficult and very problematic. And we learned very quickly they're better off released at an older age. We also learned that they need to avoid landing on power poles. And since they have an incredible memory, we're able to train them by delivering a mild electric shock when they land on a fake power pole. So they go out in the wild later and they don't land on power poles. It's just amazing. We also provide an adult mentor so that the chicks can have an adult in view during those critical times during their upbringing and make sure that they're imprinted on their own species. So those are just some of the things that we need to do to get them ready for release.
And then do you essentially kind of, everyone who's been involved in this come together and say, all right, guys, I think we're going to let Anika go free. I mean, it's got to be an emotional decision in a moment.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's almost like, letting your own kids go off to school or something, with how much time and energy and devotion our team puts into these birds. And we know how dangerous it is out there. I mean, it's a difficult world to survive in. And yeah, it's definitely emotional. We tend to release the birds using a technique called a soft release, which just means a door is open without any humans in view, and the birds can come and go as they please. And it's just a real easy, nice, soft way to let these birds transition to the wild. And we've found it to be very successful.
As we end this, I want to give the photo portion of our presentation here a shout out to Tim Huntington, who again, he's from what I understand, just a really involved member of the Ventana Wildlife Society family. And we were able to use his photos in the Alta article. And then some of those that we just looked at were didn't make the article. So we get a little bonus content there. And, kind of speaking of Tim, and as I've kind of, in going to the Wildlife Society's website, there are monthly Zoom chats that Kelly hosts with a number of guests. There seemed to be a real devoted community of people who love condors. Joy, why do you think that is?
Why? Well, why do? Well, I think it gets back to what I was saying about how they are such iconic birds, and I think people have strong reactions to, the fact that they're so big, the question of whether they're attractive or not, like there's an argument. Some people think they're ugly, some think they're beautiful. I think that, they're in the category of like a charismatic animal, which is both good and bad for an animal. Like they get our attention, but they also, we also can love them to death. But yeah, I mean, I'll spoil the article and say that I did end up seeing some condors, and I was really struck by how dramatic and gorgeous and stunning they are in person. Not in a classically beautiful way, but in just just such an interesting color. They were weirdly colorful for blackbirds. Like they have a lot of color on their heads. They have orange and yellow, and they have cranberry colored eyes. And when they hold out their wings, there's white streaks underneath, and they have these beautiful long pin feathers that sort of trail like fingers when they're flying. It's just, they're just stunning. They're really amazing creatures. And I'm so happy that they're doing well. And I hope that they continue and we get them out of that endangered benchmark, so yeah.
Kelly, you had mentioned that condors in particular have very specific personalities. Why is that? Is that just kind of specific to the species?
Yeah, I think it is, and it's really unusual in birds. I mean, these condors have been described as social as wolves and primates, and after 20 some years of working with these birds, I wholeheartedly agree with that statement. It's just amazing how social these birds are. Sometimes they've even done seemingly altruistic behaviors, helping the offspring of other birds and things like that, which you just wouldn't expect. I mean, these are very, very interesting birds. Their mating lives are interesting. Sometimes they form trios, and three birds will all cooperatively work together to raise one chick. There's just so many interesting things about these birds. I think that's what draws people in. I think they find these birds very interesting, and they quickly overlook the so-called beauty issue and look beyond the skin and realize the personality within.
They also have, I'm going to share my screen again, what appears to be, access to, how do I do? Well, I'm going to try to share my, the Condor Cam. We can watch condors throughout daylight hours through your website. So you can go to Ventana Wildlife Society's website, and there are condors in the wild right now, available. How many, could you know the numbers on like how many people are sitting there watching the wildlife? Kelly, you had mentioned that there are even people who have seen issues going on, like as they're watching the Condor Cam that you weren't aware of, and you had to dive in and help.
Yeah, the cams are wonderful. They're provided by explore.org, and we collaborate with them to provide 3 cameras that are streaming all the time. The one we're looking at now is in a redwood tree in Big Sur. This is the same cavity that was used by Redwood Queen and where Nico was raised. Redwood Queen lost her mate due to the fire and recruited, I guess is a good way to put it, this fine gentleman here named Phoenix has the number 477. Now, Phoenix has a great story too, because Phoenix was hatched in 2008 during the Basin Complex fire and survived that fire. And that's why we named him Phoenix. So now Phoenix, as you see in this live streaming video, is incubating the egg that Redwood Queen laid almost 2 months ago. In fact, this egg is due to hatch as early as this weekend. So it's a pretty exciting time. And just, Beth, you had asked about viewership. It definitely skyrockets at peak times like this, or when the chick is getting really active and it's being fed a lot. So I'd say over the next few months, it's going to get really fun and exciting. And for viewers, it's best time to view the nest is midday because they're solar powered. And sometimes you'll just see that it's on highlights. So, but a wonderful tool.
Plus it's fun, This is a very zen break in my day of just staring at a condor resting on an egg. Let's get to some questions from our audience. Judith asks, do you have any recent news with the Yurok tribe condor program?
Yeah, we work closely with them. One of their biologists used to be on our team years ago. We've been up there numerous times to help them pick out the location and techniques and field pen designs and all kinds of stuff. We're very, very excited that they were given the green light, the environmental processing took place and a review, I guess I should say. And so they now have a green light. They're actually starting construction this summer at Redwood National Park. And between the Yurok tribe and Redwood National Park, they're going to collaborate and start releases as early as this fall. So we're really excited, and we'll be up there to help them out when that gets going.
And do you attend releases?
Yeah, we try to attend all releases that they're in California anyway. But the other partner we should mention is U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which has been reintroducing condors in Southern California. Our focus here is in Central California, and we also collaborate with the National Park Service here at Pinnacles National Park.
Speaking of the Condor Cam and your eagle-eyed viewers, Anita asks, has the condor with the can stuck on its beak been captured and had the can removed?
Oh my gosh, see, this is exactly why I love these cams. It's wonderful engagement. So yes, that bird is number 943. Most people have never heard of that bird until recently, and now, you know, it's becoming a star. But the good news is we did capture that bird, and that aluminum can that was stuck on its beak, poor thing, was unable to feed for a few weeks. Was removed, and it looks like the bird's going to make a full recovery. So you can come to the Zoom chat on April 29th at 4 p.m. and you'll hear all the details from the field crew and see some photographs and other stuff like that.
That's the next monthly Zoom chat that you're going to do.
Correct.
I will admit to our viewers that I have gone back to the archives, and I'll shoot you a link to these. But they're really fascinating Zoom conversations. I mean, we get into the weeds of condor life, but they're really fascinating Zoom conversations. I recommend them. Anne asks, is the tracking mechanism followed via GPS?
Oh yes, thanks for bringing that up. That was a groundbreaking tool we started using in 2003. Once we were able to put GPS tracking devices on these birds, once they became small enough that we could, it opened up the door to a whole lot of inquiry. We can focus on where the nesting birds are. We can use that information to infer where they're feeding. And then when we know where they're feeding, we know where to redirect our non-lead ammunition efforts to hunters and ranchers, so it'll have the most impact. And all of that's possible because of the GPS technology.
Stacy notes that when reading some of the bios of the condors, again, the condors have full biographies on the Ventana Wildlife Society's page, which is very fun, I think. We noticed that you can put an egg in the nest and adults will foster it. Also, sometimes 2 females or 2 males will raise the young. Can you talk about this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really fascinating. Some of these aspects we're still learning. They lay just 1 egg at a time. And, you know, sometimes you have trios form where they cooperatively raise that 1 egg. To me, I just find that extremely fascinating. As far as the swapping out of eggs, we haven't really been doing that in the last 5 years or so. 10 years ago, we were, because we were very concerned about the possibility of eggshell thinning caused by the pesticide DDT and the use from decades ago. It's still out there in the marine environment. So we very carefully studied condor eggs at that time, and then realized that they're doing really well reproductively, and we didn't need to manage or mitigate those nests. But at that time, we would take out an egg that was not viable and then put in a fake egg that has the exact same size, weight, color, everything. And that would trick them, and they would incubate that egg. And then we'd come back with another egg from the zoo that was ready to hatch, and then swap it again. And then they would raise that chick. And that would be what we would call a foster or a fostering. But again, that level of management isn't even really being done anymore. We're really focused in on the lead poisoning issue and reducing mortality. Reproductively, they're doing really well out there.
The mortality numbers from the lead poisoning are surprisingly high considering the number of condor in the, I mean, it's something like how many, 90 something condors died from lead poisoning.
Yeah, it represents 50% of the known causes. I mean, there's just no other cause that comes close. If we can solve this one threat, the other threats won't really matter. In other words, if we can solve the lead problem, condors will become self-sustaining again, and we can take those tags off.
When on the Ventana Wildlife Society's website, you have the numbers of the condors in the wild and just the world, including in captivity, and then there it says missing. 9 condors are currently unaccounted for. How Did that happen? And is
Well,
that
that was from the Dolan fire, which started mid-August or third week in August last year. And for the first several months, we had no detection, no visual at all of these 9 birds. And we didn't declare them missing right away. We considered them, we didn't declare them dead right away. Sorry, we declared them missing. But we did since then declare those birds as having died in the fire. We don't have any direct evidence of it, but everything points to that being the case. So I think it's just a matter of eliminating that number that are missing, that they're really considered dead at this point.
sad? Well, for those condors that are living, Joy first, and then Kelly, can you give us your tips on if any one of us wants to go see a condor in the wild? I want both tips and rules in terms of safe condor sighting in California. Joy.
Well, if you read the article, I started to go to Pinnacles National Park, and then it started raining, and I was just like, I didn't do it. I didn't go on. I was scared to climb rocks in the rain. But I hear Pinnacles is a great place to go in the morning, in particular, or in the evening, when the birds are going back to their nest, or something along those lines. Which is it, Kelly? Is it the evening or the morning that you're more likely to see them?
Well, so midday is the best time in terms of flying conditions,
Oh, okay.
but midday is also the hottest time of the day. So,
Okay. Well, anyway, so yeah, Pinnacles National Park, and then there are some places in Big Sur. I mean, when I saw them in Big Sur, it was just along Highway 1. So yeah, those are the areas that I know about. But yeah, I'm sure Kelly can give you many more tips than I can.
yeah, I mean, virtually anywhere from Big Sur to San Simeon, you have a chance of seeing birds along the coast, and there's many pullouts along the highway that you can pull off safely. You're talking about rules out there. Make sure you don't leave any trash behind. Even little tiny bottle caps can be a problem. So be very mindful of trash, and don't approach the birds. But other than that, I don't really have any other rules except just enjoy them. That's what it's all about. We want to restore the balance in nature, but also to bring back the condor, to regain its position in the wild.
And you're hopeful that that's going to happen?
Absolutely.
Do you have a ballpark time frame?
I've already been working on it for 20 years or a little more. So, that's an important point to make here. If people think that conservation is a quick, easy fix, you really need to think again. And it's so much more important to prevent these catastrophic damaging events, whether it's pesticide use, DDT, and then we figure out, oh, it's a big problem, or any number of things. We tend to find out about the problem after it's already caused a lot of damage, and then we go try to fix it. But wouldn't it be a lot smarter if we could be more proactive and avoid some of these major environmental disasters to begin with? So maybe in a way, that's what this is all about, is to provide some inspiration and hope that there's better ways of doing business out there.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, it's interesting because when you look at it, it's like, on one hand, it's really remarkable that these birds are doing so well, like going from completely in captivity, extinct in the wild, to having their range increase to the way that it is. We're going up into Northern California now. But the amount of effort that it took to get there, the years of dedicated people like yourself, resources, creative solutions, like figuring out the lead bullets and aluminum bullets and all, the alternatives. And, when you look at that, it's crazy how much effort it takes to repair damage we do. So if we could just avoid the damage, it would be a lot better, right?
Someone rapidly out of time, but Diane asks, and this is interesting, will Kelly, presumably, will the Condor Driving Tours resume once the pandemic is behind us? She's been on the tour before and it's incredible.
Oh, good. Well, thanks for asking. And yes, we do plan to resume. I don't have a date at this point in time. It's still a little bit premature for that, but I think we will be getting back to doing the tours. And when we do, we'll start giving plenty of advance notice for signups and things. But it's still a little bit too early right now, especially in closed-in spaces. Even if you're vaccinated, you're supposed to keep distance. So, vehicles is the most restrictive thing right now.
Sure. Well, Diane, stay tuned. All right. Well, with that, we have gone over, because this is so fabulous. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. While I have you, if you were late to the party, this has all been recorded, and I'm going to shoot you an email with this entire interview, as well as links to a number of things that we've discussed today related to condors. Next week, we're maintaining the flight theme. We're going to look at a team we're going to meet with. Cal Academy Senior Research Fellow Darrell Kaplan and Alta contributor John Markoff. We're going to talk about a team of California scientists working to bring an extinct species of butterfly back to life. So that is going to be April 28th at 12:30, and I'm going to shoot you an invite for that as well. A big, big thank you to Joy and Kelly for taking the time and talking condors with us today. It was a ton of fun. And to everyone else, thank you again, and stay safe. We'll see you next time.
All right.